Hello, welcome back. I'm Shuli Ghosh with the top stories on Aljazeera. Syria's President Bashar al-Assad has warned against foreign intervention in his nation's affairs. Protesters have been calling for a no-fly zone to help end a bloody crackdown on the country. Australian Prime Minister Julia Gillard is calling for an end to the Qantas Airways labour dispute, which has grounded all the company's planes. Both sides are now presenting their case to a government mediation body which could order an end to the industrial action. And Egyptian officials have helped to secure a ceasefire between Israel and Palestinian fighters. The truce comes after cross-border attacks killed at least 10 people on Saturday. Let's get more on our top story now. Louay Safi joins me in the studio. He's a member of the opposition Syrian National Council. Good to have you with us. So these statements by President Assad that the whole region will be burned if there's foreign intervention in Syria, what do you make of that?
Well, I think he's, on the one hand, trying to exaggerate things so that he make people think twice before doing anything about the Syrian situation. But then we have to, he has to understand that he is inviting any intervention. There is so much the world can bear in terms of using force against unarmed civilians. And so if he continues on the same path, then he will be responsible for inviting outside intervention.
But there is a reluctance, isn't there, particularly by the West, to become involved in Syria in any greater capacity than ordering sanctions against the leader. Opposition figures are calling for a no-fly zone. Talking to the Arab League today, and the aim of those talks, as I understand it, is to try and get a dialogue going between the Syrian government and opposition figures. Are you prepared to talk to Assad?
Well, I mean, the aim of the talk, it seems, to buy time so he could crush the uprising in Syria. He has done nothing to show that he is willing to do any reform.
He says he's made enough political reform.
Well, he has made a lot of statements and issued a lot of decrees. None of them have been implemented. I mean, every time he issues decrees, the situation gets worse. He lifted the emergency law, but he, sent the military into the streets, unconstitutionally. So I don't think he's serious about it. He has to show some seriousness, and the Syrian regime has not shown at all that it's willing to go into a democratic, transition.
So, I mean, do you think there will come a point where there will be a growing clamour for a no-fly zone? Because the problem with that is that a lot of countries look at what happened in Libya, Arab countries in particular, who feel that NATO overstepped its mark in Libya when it imposed a no-fly zone.
The regime has been careful not to use the Air Force, though we have reports yesterday that the helicopters were used to bombard Homs. And so I think probably we might get to a point where the demand of the people is so strong that even the opposition will be willing to call for a no-fly zone.
Do you see an end to this? I mean, when you look at what's going on inside Syria, it just seems to be the most intractable of the Arab uprisings. Do you see the tide turning at all?
Well, it will. It will. I think ultimately the regime will collapse, even without any outside intervention, because it cannot sustain.
But it still has a lot of, the security forces are still protecting the government.
That's true.
That's
that's true, and that's why they are relying mainly on the security forces. But then the security forces will not be able to stand if the economy collapses completely, and if the people of Damascus and Aleppo will start to, will take to the street demanding real change and reform. People in these two cities have been quiet. And I think this will not continue for long because the economic situation is deteriorating and the government will not be able to spend on their security forces to suppress the population for long.
That's a very good point. Thank you very much indeed for speaking with us. Louay Safi from the Syrian National Council.